it appears that he was arrested shortly before 11 o'clock this morning, riding a push bike along a towpath some distance away in Greenford. And he was spotted by a plainclothes detective who was part of the team who pushed him from the bike and arrested him.
The Wandsworth prisoner who'd escaped, Daniel Khalife, has been found and arrested. The Metropolitan Police had been focusing what really was a national manhunt for Khalife. They focused down into Chiswick after he had been sighted in the West London region. Now, he's been on the run for 3 days. Rishi Sunak spoke earlier. Here's what he had to say.
Well, I'm very pleased with the news, and my thanks to the police officers for their fantastic work over the past couple of days, but also to the public who came forward with an enormous number of leads to help the police in their inquiries. It's good news that we've recaptured the person concerned. As people already know, the Justice Secretary has initiated an inquiry into the circumstances of his escape, and that work will continue. But this is obviously very welcome news, and again, my thanks to the police, but also to the public for their help.
Well, it's been a story that's really gripped the attention of the public for lots of reasons. Now, in a moment, we'll be speaking with Vanessa Freak. Vanessa's a former prison governor who was also head of security at Wormwood Scrubs. But just before we do that, let's catch up with Duncan Gardham. Duncan has been covering this story for The Times, and there's just been a briefing by the police. He joins us now. Duncan, welcome.
Hi.
What have you learnt from this briefing? What more do we know about the arrest?
Well, we know that essentially in the early hours of this morning, police were led to a property in the Richmond Borough area, but just across the river from Chiswick, which is where they ended up later on in the a couple of hours later. It appears that Daniel Khalife, the suspect, has fled across the river, and then a large number of searches took place in Chiswick. And then eventually it appears that he was arrested shortly before 11 o'clock this morning, riding a push bike along a towpath some distance away in Greenford. And he was spotted by a plainclothes detective who was part of the team who pushed him from the bike and arrested him.
Wow. I mean, a lot of detail there. I mean, do we have any sense if he was entirely working alone? Do we have any sense if anybody might have been helping him in any way?
Well, so far, the police have not arrested anyone for assisting an offender or harbouring a suspect. So that doesn't appear to be the case at the moment. But they say their investigations are continuing, particularly into how he got out of the prison. And we know that it was some kind of intelligence that led them to this location in Richmond. And so there is an ongoing investigation. They understandably say that their focus has been on catching him so far, and that the investigation into who might have helped him is a continuing one.
And look, there's been a sort of bit of dark humour around this. A lot of people, you will have seen the memes and things like that yourself, Duncan, on social media, saying that this started off as a sort of audacious sort of prison break style sort of bust out, and then it's ended up with him getting caught in Chiswick. Many people had speculated that he might even be out of the country by this point. Do you have any sort of ideas about why he didn't go out of London, why he just ended up in Chiswick?
It's quite difficult to get out to get a long distance if you don't have any money, and my understanding is he had limited access or no access to money. He was wise enough not to be using any kind of electronic communications, having been a member of the Royal Signals Regiment, and that will have severely limited his mobility. Of course, taking public transport of any description tends to put you open to tracking by CCTV. If you get on a bus in London, get on a train, you will be on CCTV somewhere, and he will have been aware of that as well. So his attempts to stay under the radar have really limited his movements and also his access to resources.
Really interesting. And look, there's been a lot of criticism about why this breakout was allowed to happen. Do you think we can look at the police and say, actually, they have done a good job on this? They have caught him relatively quickly?
Yes, I think they are extremely grateful to the public for their assistance in this capture. Although it was intelligence that led them to the first location, there then followed a series of reports from members of the public that helped them track him down, because when they turned up at that first location, Khalife wasn't there. So it is some of those calls from the public that have then been enabled them to realize, A, that he's changed clothing into dark clothing, and that he was on the move and moving across the river.
Yeah, really interesting, the role of the public. Do you think that the financial sort of reward helped sort of motivate the public, or do you think they would have sort of helped anyway?
My sense is that the public were helping anyway, and that reward was really aimed at anyone that might have been harboring him or keeping him keeping him safe secretly. So I think we already know they had 50 calls before the reward and at least another 50 actionable calls after the reward. So there were a fairly constant number of helpful calls from the public coming in.
Well, it's an extraordinary story. Duncan, thanks very much for catching us up with the latest. That's Duncan Gardham, a journalist who's been covering this story for The Times.